From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. We begin in Brazil, where the National Indigenous Foundation has condemned the murder of a Wajapi indigenous leader who was attacked by a group of armed miners in the northern state of Amapá. Our correspondent Ignacio Lemos has more details.
In the indigenous Wajapi lands in the state of Amapá in the north of Brazil, an indigenous leader, Emira Wajapi, was murdered by a group of illegal armed miners, according to a statement given to the National Indigenous Foundation by the indigenous community. The attackers, who were armed with machine guns, invaded the indigenous land located close to the Renca Reserve, a natural and environmental protection area here in Brazil. The Wajapi people have already reported and condemned the entry of these illegal miners. At the time, Jair Bolsonaro said that declaring his son, Eduardo Bolsonaro, as the new U.S. ambassador would ensure that mining agreements on indigenous land are fulfilled. Bolsonaro says indigenous areas are strategic for Brazil's economic growth. However, his plans involve taking away the rights of indigenous communities living in those territories. Opposition parties and movements have already expressed and rejected Bolsonaro's statement and plans. They say these plans will lead to a genocide of indigenous people. The United Nations has also expressed concern at the murder of the Wajapi leader.
That was Ignacio Lemos from Brazil. And we stay in that country where at least 57 prisoners have died after a riot broke out at the Altamira prison in the north of the country. Reportedly, a fight between criminal groups started when breakfast was being served. According to state prison authorities, at least 16 victims were beheaded, while others were asphyxiated. The inmates later set fires around the prison, preventing authorities from entering for about 5 hours. No prison staff were injured, although 2 were held hostage, but were later released. And Brazil's presidential spokesperson has said the prisoners who have been identified as ringleaders of the riot will be transferred from the Altamira facility to other federal penitentiaries.
The Ministry of Justice and Public Safety has made available space in the federal penitentiary system for the transfer and isolation of the criminal leaders involved in the rebellion that took place on Monday morning at the Altamira Regional Recovery Center and left more than 50 dead.
Now we turn to Venezuela. The country is mourning the murders of 6 Chavista campesino activists by a paramilitary group in Barinas state on July 27th. Social movements and family members were defiant as they called for justice. Those murdered were part of the Bolivar and Zamora Revolutionary Current and the Hugo Chavez People's Defense Brigades. They were Mileidis Navas, José Rojas, Manuel Cordero, Alexis Ontiveros, Eudes Rojas, and Kevin Navas. The president of the National Constituent Assembly condemned the murders and called for an investigation.
We want to alert you to an incident that happened in the state of Barinas. Venezuelans were murdered by a paramilitary group. It's nothing new that our campesinos are killed by these kind of assassins. It's more than 300 people now that have been murdered. We absolutely condemn this violence. We demand a full investigation to find those responsible for the killings. Justice will be done for the dead, including a woman who had a 1-month-old child. This is the violence that has been imported from Colombia. They are the experts in importing violence and drugs. It's an evil on the world. We express our solidarity with the campesino movement, and we demand an investigation into both the intellectual authors and those who actually carried out the attack.
The foreign minister of Paraguay, Luis Castiglioni, has resigned over an energy agreement he signed with Brazil. Social movements protested in Asunción over the weekend against the agreement. They say it would have much more control to Brazil over the giant Itaipu hydroelectric plant, which the 2 countries share. Last week, the head of Paraguay's state electricity company, ANDE, also resigned in opposition to the deal. He said it would cost the country an extra $300 million. Our correspondent in Paraguay, Osvaldo Sayas, has the details.
I'm here in the Paraguayan Senate. This is where we were expecting the Foreign Minister, Luis Castiglione, to appear, along with Luis Alderete, the president of the Itaipu plant, Alcides Jimenez, the president of the state electricity company Andes, and Hugo Caballero, the Paraguayan ambassador to Brazil. However, the session has been cancelled after President Mario Abdo accepted the resignation of all 4 men. All this is because of the agreement the Paraguayan government signed with the Brazilian government of Jair Bolsonaro. According to the opposition, this agreement surrendered Paraguay's sovereignty over the Itaipu hydroelectric plant, which Paraguay shares with Brazil. This agreement only became public 2 months after it was signed, and provoked demonstrations by social movements, as well as threats of a motion of censure in Congress against the president. The opposition Liberal group in the lower house said that if the president didn't sack the foreign minister and these other officials today, they would table the motion of censure. The Senate is now going to debate a motion that would leave the agreement between the Paraguayan and Brazilian governments without effect.
Our correspondent Osvaldo Sayas. And a Truth Commission in Colombia received the first report on the violence that was carried out in public universities by the state in collaboration with paramilitary groups, including murders, torture, and illegal detentions.
The report shows the repression trade union members, students, and lecturers went through at the hands of the state, which they're now denouncing to the Truth Commission. The report also seeks to reveal criminal practices inside the public universities.
We are demanding that the Truth Commission sets up chapters in all the public universities, especially those on the Caribbean region, where most of the victims, paramilitary forces between 1998 and 2007 were based. They were victims of paramilitary forces that tried to change the policies of public universities through blood and fire.
This report has testimonies of victims of repression between 2000 and 2019. The most recent is from Mateo Gutierrez, a young student who was accused of being a member of the ELN by the government, an allegation they failed to prove.
The report shows the Cotaro case of Professor Maguio Angel and my parents' case. It also has other similar cases, such as that of Reynaldo, a student who was murdered in Barranquilla after returning from exile in Chile. There are also Caribbean cases with missing or fabricated documents, not only about the murder's account, but also the context of those murders.
The country's public universities are not only suffering from state repression, they are also stigmatized by some sections of the media, which accuse the student movement of being groups of criminals.
Since the Cold War, the militaries have had a practice of seeing the civil population as fiends or enemies. This practice has been systematic between 2000 and 2009. It is important to highlight the blood and fire, as told the ex-paramilitary chief Mancuso. He told me, I take the universities with blood and fire, and he took all universities on the Caribbean coast.
The Truth Commission expects that with this report it will end the stigmatization, persecution and criminalization of the student movement, which has increased since the last student marches against the privatization of public universities.
The Commission has a task to promote the recognition of liability. In the university issue, we will seek to reveal and acknowledge on the role played by paramilitaries, guerrillas and the state in the violence inside universities. It is therefore important to promote dialogue in all sectors of learning institutions. We also seek to implement some strategies of coexistence and to avoid a repeat of the past mistakes.
In the coming days, the report will be delivered to a special tribunal for peace, a transitional entity that will have the task of judging any action or omission causing murder, forced disappearance, torture or repression of students, trade unions and lecturers from public universities across the country.
After the break, we take a look at the effect of the U.S. new migration agreement with Honduras. Don't go away.
acompañamos a los pueblos que resisten en cada una de sus luchas.
Somos esa ventana que se abre para visibilizarlos entre fronteras.
Thursdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Bolivia's Minister of Hydrocarbons has condemned the plans of opposition presidential candidates who seek to privatize the sector. According to Minister Luis Alberto Sanchez, the plans of the right-wing candidates Carlos Mesa, Víctor Hugo Cárdenas and Oscar Ortiz for the hydrocarbon sector will lead to a significant increase in fuel prices, as these candidates have proposed the privatization of the state-owned oil company YPBF. The government of Evo Morales was responsible for nationalizing the company, which today has assets worth $20 billion, in addition to owning the country's oil and natural gas reserves. Environmental movements in El Salvador are asking the National Assembly to pass legislation to limit the damage caused by the use of plastic. They want controls on the production and sale of plastic products, especially single-use ones.
The pollution of rivers and the sea by huge quantities of plastic has become a worldwide concern. In El Salvador, environmentalists are demanding regulation of these products, which are damaging to health.
It's a very long-lasting material. It can take 500 years for plastic to decompose. However, it was only invented a century and a half ago, which means that all of the plastic items that we are ever created are still there, some in waste tips, some in the ocean.
Global plastic production is estimated to be 400 million tons per year. The low level of recycling means that many of these items end up in the sea.
It ends up being food for the fish, and then we eat the fish. Every week, each human being consumes enough plastic to make a credit card. In 2014, there was 1 pound of plastic in the ocean for every 5 pounds of fish. By mid-century, we are going to have more plastic than fish in the sea.
That's why environmentalists came to the Legislative Assembly to increase awareness among lawmakers about the damage caused by plastic, and to urge them to legislate to limit its production and sale, especially for products that are only used once.
The law that we have presented is short. It has 22 articles. It attributes direct responsibilities to companies and, of course, to all citizens. Since we all have a responsibility not just to throw plastic in the garbage, but to recycle it, the non-generation of waste is the main commitment.
The toxic components used to manufacture plastics have serious consequences for human health. These range from stunt growth and weight loss among children under 12 to negative impacts on the immune and reproductive systems.
In Chile's Patagonia, more than 40,000 liters of diesel were spilled at a terminal belonging to the CAP mining company. The spill occurred 250 kilometers northeast of Puerto Natales. The Navy said that they have managed to recover close to 15,000 liters of contaminated water. Authorities are continuing an investigation into the cause of the spill. The director of Greenpeace Chile asked for transparency from the Navy and the mining company.
There are mammal habitats near to the site of the incident, and a unique ocean biodiversity. There are dolphins and other places used by whales as a sanctuary on our planet. The waters of Patagonia are a genuine sanctuary because they are some of the most pristine waters that we still have on Earth.
There is a maritime investigation on the board in order to begin the opening stages of an investigation into the causes, circumstances, and responsibilities that there will be regarding the spill of diesel into the sea.
Now to Honduras, where out of all the people who migrate, 43% are women, 7% are children, and 50% are men. That's according to the International Organization for Migration. Its recent report says the number of women migrating has increased because of violence from criminal gangs.
Many mothers flee Honduras with their children because the country is unsafe and there are no jobs to support their families.
The truth is, there is no work here. You cannot find employment. I applied many times, but they just keep my applications and never call back. It's impossible.
According to the Mexican Committee for Aid to Refugees, COMAR, up until June, Honduras was the country with the highest number of asylum requests, 52% of the total. Most say they have been threatened by criminal gangs back home.
The country faces huge challenges in terms of inequality and unemployment, but also of violence, which makes it even more difficult to find solutions.
In addition to the lack of state aid for victims of the widespread violence, there is a total absence of social policies to tackle poverty, which affects 68% in Honduras, and this causes even more insecurity.
All this mass migration where families with children, sometimes children traveling alone, join these big caravans, stems from just one thing: the complete failure of social policies and the lack of any opportunities for inclusion or participation in the country.
Feminist organizations say the government has also failed to look after the women and children locked in detention centers on the border or inside the United States.
At this point, the government is not meeting its obligations. We have to demand it carries out its legal duties. Unfortunately, there's no security at all for all those people who migrate and find themselves in those places.
According to the organization Casa Alianza, 200 children migrate every hour, and since the end of last year, the number has been going up.
We spoke to Yolanda Gonzalez about the agreement between the government of Honduras and the United States. She's a research coordinator for human rights with the Jesuits Service, Eric SG.
This third safe country agreement basically implies that people from El Salvador and Honduras do not have the right to seek asylum in the United States if they went through Guatemala. The 90% of people fleeing violence in Honduras towards the United States goes through Guatemala. And if they arrive at the United States and they seek asylum, they will be deported to Guatemala, because if we read the agreement, Guatemala is supposed to be a safe country. There are two exceptions in the agreement: one, the non-accompanied minors, and the other one, the people who enter with a visa. But we have to say that this agreement, I think we all agree, is not only against national legislation, international human rights framework, but also is against court decisions, either in Guatemala and United States. To consider Guatemala a safe country is ignoring that, for example, regarding United Nations reports, last year 30,000 people from Guatemala fled violence and seek asylum or are already refugees.
Still to come, Saudi Arabia has bombed a market in Yemen, killing at least 13 civilians. We'll be back.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your green zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
Thank you for joining us again. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has pledged to grow bilateral relations with Thailand during a meeting with the Thai Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha in Bangkok. The two countries are set to cooperate to a greater extent on trade, security and defense. Lavrov is on an official visit ahead of the summit of the Regional Association of Southeast Nations.
We have taken note of the increase in our trade volume. Our trade have grown by 17% last year and surpassed the amount of $2.6 billion US. This is a sustainable trend, which continues this year as well. We also have taken note of the good prospects for developing our military and military technical cooperation. Recently, Thailand's Navy vessel has visited our seaport of Vladivostok for the first time.
At least 18 people have been killed in Pakistan after a military plane on a training flight crashed into a residential area in the city of Rawalpindi. A statement by the military said the plane was on a routine training mission when it crashed. The victims include 2 pilots, the crew members, and 12 civilians. Another 12 civilians sustained injuries.
It was 2 a.m. when the incident happened. The tail of the plane was on fire and it took barely 2 to 3 seconds and it crashed 4 houses away from my house on the 5th one and bent to ashes.
Rohingya refugees living in Bangladesh are unwilling to return to Myanmar without guarantees of better treatment. Over 600,000 members of the Rohingya community are believed to have fled into Bangladesh to escape persecution in Myanmar. A delegation from the Myanmar Ministry of Foreign Affairs took part in repatriation talks with Rohingya leaders on Sunday, but the government is unwilling to meet the displaced community's demands.
On July 27 and 28, a delegation from Burma came to Kutupalong and met with a group of people and leaders from the Rohingya community. They gave us this letter where they wrote down the facilities they want to give us if we go back, like the national verification card, resident card. But they don't accept that we are citizens of the country. We want our citizenship card. We will not accept the NVC residence card. We are indigenous Rohingya. We do not accept this paper. We don't agree.
At least 13 civilians, including 2 children, have been killed in northern Yemen following an artillery strike by Saudi forces. The attack on the Al Tabet market in the Al-Shabi district of Sada also left 26 wounded, 12 of whom are children. Since 2015, fighting between a US-backed Saudi-led coalition and Houthi rebels has led to a humanitarian crisis in Yemen, as tens of thousands have died and millions are suffering from starvation. Thousands of municipal workers in South Africa protested on Monday on the streets of the capital, Pretoria, demanding an 18% pay rise. The protests followed the failure by the workers' union and municipal authorities to reach an agreement after weeks of negotiations. Last week, the Municipal and Allied Workers' Union declared a deadlock and called on its members to take to the streets until their demands are met. Sudanese students have been demonstrating in Khartoum against the latest killing of their colleagues. The protesters accused the Rapid Support Forces of shooting dead 5 teenage protesters at a rally in El Obeid on Monday. They were striking against shortages of bread and fuel, while others were part of the sitting outside the army headquarters. Protest leaders and the ruling generals are set to hold new talks on the country's transition process this week.
We came out today in support of our martyrs who were killed in Al Obeid. We're not alone. Sudan is one. The blood of the martyrs is one, and our blood is one. There isn't blood from the south, the north, the centre, from anywhere. Our blood is one, and we came here to support the blood of our martyrs.
The UN envoy to Libya has called for a truce to be declared in the country by August 10th. Ghassan Salame said such a truce must mark the Eid al-Adha holiday and be accompanied by confidence-building moves, such as exchange of prisoners and the release of those arbitrarily detained.
Following the truce, I request a high-level meeting of concerned countries to cement the cessation of hostilities, work together to enforce the strict implementation of the arms embargo to prevent the further flow of weapons to the Libyan theater, and promote strict adherence to international humanitarian and human rights law by Libyan parties.
Music has for a long time been used as a tool for obtaining social and political change across the world. So a group of youths from poor communities in the Moroccan city of Casablanca is using music to express their concerns and opinions about social and economic challenges they face. The project, that is led by a local cultural center, also aims to break some of the cultural barriers that exist in society. The initiative has inspired the creation of movies by a French-Moroccan filmmaker.
The fact that they are welcome here and given the opportunity to express themselves is already an important thing for them. And today, for example, from the Battle of Rap, we see from their words they have a lot of questions about the future, about society. They have a critical eye on what's happening in their country today. And it is interesting to listen to them too.
And with that, we end our news brief. But you can find all of our stories by checking our website, telesurenglish.net. And be sure to join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and also Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez.